Welcome to IslamicDonut.com.
It's great to be here for this.
I had this moment just yesterday that I think it just perfectly sums up the strange time we're living in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was sitting at my desk, right? I've got my banking app open on one monitor, and I'm just watching these numbers flicker. Digital transfers, pending transactions, just little bits of data flying around the world at the speed of light.
The usual chaos of modern finance.
Exactly. But then I'm on my other screen. I have my calendar open, and it hits me. Ramadan 2025 it's just barreling towards us. 1446 on the Hijri calendar.
It always seems to sneak up, doesn't it?
It really does. But the feeling I had wasn't just, anticipation for the month. It was this real tension. Because on one hand, I'm fully in this hyper-fast world of fintech and blockchain, instant everything. And on the other hand, I'm getting ready for a month that is all about slowing down.
About returning to fundamentals.
Exactly. About ancient obligations that haven't changed one bit in over 1,000 years. And it made me think about the people listening to this, the learners.
Right.
We have listeners who are incredibly tech savvy. They probably understand yield farming better than I do. But they're also deeply, deeply value driven. And they're asking themselves, does my portfolio, does it actually align with my soul?
That is, I think, the defining question for our generation, isn't it? We are straddling two completely different eras.
We really are.
We have all the tools of the 21st century at our fingertips, but our moral compass, it's calibrated to principles from the 7th century. And a lot of the time, those two things just feel like they're grinding against each other.
That's the perfect word for it, grinding. It's
Yeah.
friction. And for a devout person who's also trying to be a smart investor, that friction just shows up as confusion. You look at this digital revolution, all the cryptocurrencies, the tokens, the metaverse, and you just have to wonder, is this real? Is this honest value? Or is it all just a sophisticated casino?
And that skepticism is not only healthy, it's necessary. It's actually a sign of faith.
How do you mean?
Well, when you see things like high-frequency trading algorithms manipulating markets in microseconds, it's very easy to feel that the soul of finance, that original concept of fair exchange and tangible value, has just completely
That
evaporated.
feels like it's been replaced by code.
So that skepticism is your internal compass telling you to be cautious.
So that's our mission for this discussion then. We're going to try to resolve some of that tension. We're going to navigate that intersection between modern finance and Sharia principles. We've got a really comprehensive guide here, a review put together by the Islamic Donut Charity for this upcoming Ramadan season. And we're going to use it to answer a very specific and I think very burning question. Is digital gold halal for investment?
And we're going to get into the details. This is just going to be a simple yes or no. We're going to really dismantle the mechanics of it. The source material points us specifically at a couple of assets, XAUT, which is Tether Gold, and PAXG, or PAX Gold.
Right. And just to be clear for everyone, the material we're exploring today comes directly from the Islamic Donut Charity. They're a registered nonprofit organization. Their registration number is 2844 for anyone who likes to check the credentials.
And they've put this guide together for a reason. They see this confusion in the community every day. They see good people who want to preserve their wealth according to their principles, but they're afraid of the technology.
So this is our exploration of their findings. It's a review of the evidence they've laid out.
And it's an exploration that forces us to be incredibly precise with our language. Because crypto is, well, it's a dirty word to some people. And it's a word of salvation to others.
It's so polarizing.
It is. But as we're about to see, there's a massive, massive chasm between crypto as some kind of speculative gambling chip and the specific asset class we are discussing today.
Okay, let's unpack that. And I don't want to start with the blockchain. I don't want to start with digital wallets. I want to start where the source itself begins. They take us back, way, way back, to what they call the sacred standard.
Which is really the only place you can start. If you want to understand if a financial tool is halal today, you have to understand what money was intended to be from the very beginning.
Right.
The source material highlights this crucial historical fact. Since the earliest days of Islam, gold and silver weren't just shiny metals you use for jewelry. They were the ultimate measure of value.
The ultimate measure, that phrase, it feels heavy. It feels permanent.
It is permanent. See, in our modern world, we're completely used to fiat currency.
That's money just because the government says it is.
Exactly. It's a promise.
Right.
But in Islamic law, and for most of human history, the dinar, which was gold, and the dirham, silver, were the money. They were the standard. When we read about the history of trade in Medina, or the caravans moving across the desert. They weren't trading paper promises. They were trading weight.
Tangible weight. You can feel it in your hand.
Precisely. A gold dinar wasn't some abstract concept. It was a physical coin with a specific weight. Historically, it was about 4.25 grams of pure gold. It had intrinsic value. If you melted it down, it was still gold. Now, if you melt down a $100 bill, what do you have left?
You've got some colorful burnt lint.
Yeah.
Nothing.
You have nothing. And this distinction is absolutely vital because, for centuries, gold was the primary way you would invest and preserve your wealth. The goal wasn't to get rich quick.
Yeah.
It was about ensuring that the value of the labor you did today would still be there for your family 20 years from now. It is inherently halal because it is inherently real. There's no deception.
I think that's such a key point that gets completely lost in modern finance.
Yeah.
We are so obsessed with growth, how much did the stock market go up this quarter? But the Islamic perspective seems to be so much more focused on preservation.
That's a very accurate way to put it. And this connects directly to the sacred obligation of zakat al-mal. You cannot separate the theology of money from the theology of charity. They are two sides of the same coin, literally.
Okay, let's define zakat al-mal for anyone who might be newer to the terminology or maybe just needs a refresher on the absolute specifics.
Of course, zakat al-mal is the obligatory charity paid on one's wealth. It's not optional. It's one of the 5 pillars of the faith, sacred duty. But here is where that gold connection becomes the absolute linchpin of the entire system.
Okay.
To know if you even owe zakat on your wealth, you first have to meet a minimum threshold. That threshold is called the nisab. And how has the nisab been calculated for the last 1,400 years?
It's based on gold.
It's based on gold.
Yeah.
It is defined as the value of 85 grams of gold or corresponding weight in silver. So just think about what that means for a second. Even today, in 2025, whether your wealth is in dollars, euros, yen, or even Bitcoin, the yardstick that determines your spiritual obligation is gold.
Wow.
You can't escape it. The modern believer is tied directly to this ancient physical standard.
That's a really powerful image. No matter how digital or abstract our financial lives become, the anchor is still physical gold. But, and here is where that friction you mentioned really comes in, the source identifies a massive problem. They put it very simply. The world moves faster.
It moves so much faster.
The old ways of actually holding gold, let's be honest, in a modern city, they are a logistical nightmare. Just imagine I want to convert, say, my emergency savings into physical gold right now.
Okay, walk me through it. What's your plan?
All right, so first I have to find a reputable dealer. Can't just go down to the corner store. I have to drive somewhere specific. Then I have to pay a premium over the spot price of gold. Sometimes a pretty hefty one. That's for the minting, the dealer's profit, all that. Then they hand me this heavy piece of metal. Now I'm walking down the street with my life savings in my pocket. Suddenly I'm paranoid.
And you should be.
Then I get home. Now what? Where do we put it? Under the mattress, dig a hole in the backyard, maybe buy a big safe that basically just screams, rob me, there's something valuable in here.
And that is the reality for so many people. The physical possession of any significant amount of gold carries a massive burden. The risk of theft is very real. The cost of insuring it is real. And it's illiquid. If you have an emergency at 2 in the morning on a Saturday, you can't just shave off a piece of your gold bar to buy medicine.
Right. Sorry, do you have change for a 1-ounce bullion? That's not going to work at the pharmacy.
Not at all. So you have this tension we keep coming back to. You have a believer who wants to honor the tradition, who understands that gold is the honest halal standard of value. But the modern lifestyle makes the physical act of holding it incredibly difficult, risky, and just plain inefficient.
So this burden, as the source calls it, of the physical gold creates a gap, a vacuum, really. We need a solution that keeps the essence of the old ways, that stability, that halal nature, that inflation-proof value, but without needing to, guard a safe in your basement with a baseball bat.
Which brings us directly to the core of this discussion and the solution proposed in the Islamic Donate Charity Guide, digital gold.
Okay, let's get into the weeds here. The source talks about XAUT and PAXG. Now, I have to play the skeptic for a second because I know what our listeners are thinking.
Please do.
When I hear the word token or digital asset, my brain, and I think a lot of people's brains, immediately goes to the Wild West. I think of Bitcoin swinging 20% in a single day. I think of Dogecoin. I think of FTX and scams. Are we talking about the same thing here?
No, and I'm so glad you brought that up because this is the single most critical distinction we need to make today. If you take away only one thing from the technical part of this discussion, it should be this. XAUT and PAXG are not unbacked cryptocurrencies that are based on pure speculation.
So if I buy one XAUT, I'm not betting on a company's roadmap. I'm not betting on some charismatic CEO to pump up the price.
Not at all. You are buying a digital representation of physical gold.
Okay, that sounds good as a marketing slogan, digital representation. But what does that actually mean mechanically? How can a token on my computer screen be gold?
It works through a very strict system of pairing and allocation. I want you to think of the token not as the money itself, but as a digital title deed.
A title deed, like for a house?
Exactly. When you buy a house, you hold a piece of paper, the deed. That paper isn't the house, but it is your legal, undeniable proof of ownership of that specific house.
Right, okay.
These tokens work in precisely the same way. When you hold one XAUT token in your digital wallet, you're effectively holding the digital title to 1 troy ounce of physical gold.
Okay, but where is the house? In this analogy, where is the actual gold? Is it just in the cloud? Because I'm pretty sure you can't upload a metal bar to a server.
No, alchemy has not quite reached the digital realm just yet. The gold is very real. It's physical. It's held in the form of 400-ounce London Good Delivery bars. And they're stored in secure, professional, and regularly audited vaults, typically in stable jurisdictions known for this, like Switzerland or London. So when you own the token, what you really own is a claim on a specific sliver of a specific gold bar sitting in a specific vault. You just hold the digital key to that ownership.
That's a really crucial detail. So the blockchain part, the crypto part of it, is really just the ledger system.
That's all it is. The blockchain is the record-keeping system. And it's a vastly superior way of tracking who owns which slice of which gold bar. Instead of some dusty paper ledger in a basement that might take days to update, you have a global, instant, immutable ledger that anyone can verify. But the asset itself is the ancient, timeless metal.
That makes a lot more sense. The source uses a really clever analogy to explain the value proposition here. They talk about the euro coin to explain this idea of parity.
Yes, the parity analogy. It's brilliant because it's so simple.
Let's walk through that because I think it helps visualize it. The source asks the question, is a 1 euro coin different in value from another 1 euro coin?
And of course, the answer is no. If I hand you a euro coin from 2010 and you hand me one from 2020, or one that was minted in France versus one minted in Germany, their value is absolutely identical. They are fungible.
And is the parity value between them always constant?
Always. 1 equals 1, period.
So now apply that same logic to digital gold.
The logic is that if this digital token is legally and technically bound to the physical gold, it becomes a valid substitute for the gold itself. The value is locked. 1 XAUT token is always equal in value to 1 troy ounce of gold. The parity is constant. So, just like you don't worry that your euro coin is fake money, just because it's not a paper banknote, you don't have to worry that the token is fake gold. It is simply a different, more efficient format for the exact same value.
That really is the aha moment. It's not a derivative that might track the price of gold. It is the price of gold.
Correct. The source has a great line for this. They call it current value digitized.
Which leads us directly to the big question, the elephant in the room. We've established that it works technically. We understand that it's convenient. But is it halal? Because let's be honest, we've seen the Sharia-compliant label slapped on some pretty questionable financial products over the years.
And that brings us to the halal analysis. The source material is very explicit here. The answer they provide is a clear yes.
Okay, but yes is not going to be enough for our listeners. They need the why. Because if I'm going to put my zakat money into this, or my life savings, I need to understand the theological mechanics behind that yes.
Of course. And the reasoning really rests on a few key pillars. The first one we just touched on, which is the equality of price. Because the digital token is legally bound to the physical asset, there is equality of value. But the second pillar is even more important in the world of Islamic finance: the removal of gharar.
Gharar. That's a massive concept in Islamic jurisprudence. Can we define that really clearly for everyone?
Gharar refers to excessive uncertainty, ambiguity, or deception in a transaction. In Islamic finance, any transaction that involves this level of uncertainty is prohibited. For example, you cannot sell what isn't there. You can't sell the birds in the sky or the fish still in the sea before you've caught them because the outcome is completely uncertain.
Right. That makes total sense. It's a consumer protection rule, basically. It protects the buyer from getting ripped off by a promise.
It's exactly that. Now, apply this concept to those speculative cryptocurrencies we talked about, the meme coins. If you buy a coin that has no underlying asset, no real utility, and its value depends entirely on whether a celebrity tweets about it tomorrow, that is pure, unadulterated garar.
It's a gamble.
It is a gamble. You have no idea what it's truly worth because intrinsically it's worth nothing. You're betting on the psychology of the crowd.
You're betting on the behavior of other people, not on the actual value of the asset itself.
Precisely. But with an asset-backed token, like XAUT or PAXG, the source argues that garar is completely removed. And why is that? Because the token's price mirrors the spot price of the metal itself. There is no ambiguity. You know exactly what it's worth at any given moment. It's worth gold. If gold is trading at $2,000 an ounce, the token is trading at $2,000. The uncertainty is gone.
So it's the transparency and the direct backing that make it permissible in this view.
It's the transparency of the backing and the immediacy of the value. The source makes another key distinction here. This is not a promise of future value. You aren't buying it hoping that the technology itself will make it worth more someday.
Ah, okay.
It is, and I'll repeat the phrase, current value digitized.
That is such a subtle but hugely important difference. Current value digitized versus future value promised.
It changes the entire nature of the contract. You are exchanging value for an equal value right now, which is the absolute basis of halal trade.
I want to push on this just a little bit because I know some of our listeners are deep into the fiqh, the jurisprudence. In traditional rulings, when you exchange gold for gold or gold for currency, there's a requirement of hand-to-hand exchange, yadan biyad. How does that work when I'm sitting here and the vault is thousands of miles away in Switzerland?
That is a fantastic question, and it's an area where modern scholars have had to do a lot of important work. The concept that applies here is called constructive possession, or qabd hukmi.
Constructive possession?
Yes. The view is that when you have the digital title, the token in your wallet, you have full, immediate, and legal control over that asset. You can sell it, transfer it, or even redeem it for the physical gold instantly. That instant settlement on the blockchain is viewed by many prominent scholars as satisfying the requirement of immediate exchange. In fact, it's faster and more certain than writing a check, which can bounce.
That's a great point. And it's really reassuring for the listeners who have been on the fence about that specific ruling. So we've established it's rooted in history, it's enabled by modern tech, and it's considered religiously sound. Now, let's talk about the real-world application. The source mentions a shift. It says that Muslims are increasingly turning to this as an alternative. Why now? What are the practical drivers?
Well, we touched on it briefly with the whole nightmare of storing physical gold. But let's look at the practical drivers one by one. The first one is simply accessibility.
Yeah, the barrier to entry for physical gold used to be really high.
Very high. If you want to buy a physical gold bar, you usually have to buy a minimum weight, maybe an ounce, maybe more. At today's prices, that's thousands of dollars. What if you only have $500 to invest this month?
You're just out of luck. You have to wait and save up.
Exactly. But with digital gold, because it's a token, it is infinitely divisible. You can buy 0.01 XAUT. It completely democratizes access to this asset class. You don't need to be wealthy to start preserving your wealth in gold. You can do it with a few clicks on your phone.
That is huge. Partial ownership means that everyone can participate, not just the wealthy.
The second big reason is security. And this one is a little counterintuitive for some people.
Right. I feel like the common thinking is if it's on the internet, it can be hacked. But if it's under my mattress, at least I can see it.
But that's a false sense of security. It's what security experts call security theater. You feel safe because you can see it. But storing physical gold in your home carries significant real-world risks: theft, fire, natural disasters. If someone breaks into your house, that gold is gone. And good luck trying to get the full value back from your insurance company without a long fight.
That's true. And you become a target if people in your community know you have it.
Precisely. Now, with digital gold, your ownership is secured by advanced cryptography. We're talking about decentralized wallets that only you have the key to. And remember, the gold itself isn't on your phone.
Right.
The gold is in a professional, insured vault with armed guards and state-of-the-art security systems. Even if you lose your phone, as long as you have your backup security phrase, your seed phrase, you can recover your assets. It completely eliminates the physical danger to your person and to your home.
So you're essentially outsourcing the physical security to the absolute best professionals, and you're just responsible for managing the access key yourself.
That is a perfect way to put it.
And the third reason the source brings up, and this definitely appeals to the investor side of my brain, is lower costs.
Oh, everyone loves lower costs.
But how is it actually cheaper? I thought crypto had all these gas fees and transaction costs.
It does, but you have to compare that to the costs in the physical world. In the FAQ section of the source material, they specifically mention the lower overhead costs compared to dealer premiums. When you buy a physical gold coin, you are paying for the manufacturing, the shipping, the insurance, the dealer's rent, the dealer's electricity bill. All of that overhead is baked into the premium you pay over the spot price. You might end up paying 5%, maybe even 10% over the actual value of the gold.
That's the spread. The second you buy it, you're immediately down 10%.
Exactly. With digital gold, because you were dealing directly with wholesale 400-ounce bars just sitting in a vault, those manufacturing and retail premiums are negligible. You're buying effectively at the spot price. The spread is much, much tighter.
So it's more efficient, more secure, and cheaper. It's a pretty hard logic to argue with. But let's pivot back to the spiritual side, because for our listener, this isn't just about hoarding wealth, is it? It's about purifying it.
Yes. And this is where the discussion of zakat al-mal comes full circle. This is the heart of the matter.
And the critical question that the source poses is this: can I pay zakat al-mal on my digital gold?
And the answer they give is an emphatic thing. Yes. In fact, the source goes further and argues that it has never been easier to do so.
How does that work in practice? Because traditionally, calculating and paying zakat can be a very manual, sometimes confusing process.
Well, first we have to establish its status. The source is clear that digital gold is a zakatable asset. It's treated in exactly the same way as physical gold, or cash in the bank, or stocks you own. So if your total wealth meets that nisab threshold we talked about, you must calculate 2.5% of its value for zakat.
Okay, so the math is the same, 2.5% of the total value.
The math is the same, but the execution of paying it is where the technology just shines. The source introduces a tool they've built called the Charity Crypto Calculator.
I love that, a specific tool for a specific job.
The phrasing they use is that Islamic Donate Charity has adapted to these technologies to facilitate worship. And I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
It is.
They're not just using tech for tech's sake. They're using it to make a pillar of the faith easier to fulfill. With their calculator, you can determine the exact real-time value of your holdings instantly. No more guessing the spot price from a website, no converting currencies. It just pulls the live data for you.
Okay, so the calculation is easy, but what about the transaction itself? Do I have to sell my digital gold, get the cash into my bank account, withdraw the cash, and then go hand it to someone? Because that process incurs fees, it can trigger tax events. It's messy.
No, that is the old way. That is the friction we're trying to eliminate. The new way is to pay your zakat directly using the crypto gold itself.
Directly, you mean you don't sell it first?
Correct. You can send your zakat directly to a charity's cryptocurrency donation address. The source specifically states that Islamic Donate Charity has set up dedicated crypto zakat wallet addresses for XAUT and for PAXG.
So I'm literally sending the token itself. I'm transferring the digital title deed for that gold directly to the charity.
You're sending the gold itself in its digital form.
That's unbelievably efficient.
It's efficient and it's transparent. And think about the speed. In the world of humanitarian aid, speed literally saves lives. When you transfer digital assets, the funds move from you to the organization almost instantly. There are no bank holidays. There are no cross-border settlement delays that can take 3 to 5 business days. It's instant.
The source material gives some specific examples of where that aid goes, right? Because people want to know the impact their zakat is having.
They do. They talk about the core missions, feeding the hungry, sheltering the displaced, providing critical medical care. And in this particular guide, they specifically highlight the cause of giving zakat to Palestine.
Which is obviously a critical area of need right now.
It is. And by using this digital rail, the value moves from your wallet to the aid organization almost instantaneously, bypassing the friction and delays of the traditional banking system. It allows the charity to deploy those resources on the ground much, much faster.
It really is about bridging two worlds, which leads us to the overall philosophy of the organization itself, Islamic Donate Charity. They seem to have a very specific worldview on this entire issue.
They do. Their entire philosophy seems to be built on this idea of bridging the gap between sacred tradition and modern life. There's a quote in the source material that I think just sums it up perfectly.
Which one is that?
While the tools of finance change, the principles of our faith remain eternal.
Oh, I like that. That's very powerful.
It creates a permission structure for the believer. It says you don't have to be afraid of the new tools. The tool itself can change. We used to ride camels. Now we drive cars. We used to use physical gold coins. Now we can use digital tokens. The tool is irrelevant. The principal charity, zakat, helping the poor, that is what is eternal.
And they talk about this idea of purifying wealth.
Yes. Zakat is often just translated as charity, but the root word in Arabic, zakah, implies purification, cleansing, and even growth. So by accepting Tether Gold and these other assets, the charity is providing a seamless way for you to purify your digital wealth. You're taking a portion of your digital asset and returning it to the community, and in doing so, you purify the rest of what you hold.
There's another metaphor they use that really stuck with me. They said that the listener, that you are a partner in this mission.
Yes, and they followed it up by saying, every token of gold you give transforms into a mountain of good deeds.
A mountain of good deeds. That's such a beautiful image. It takes something that can feel very cold and digital, a token, a string of code on a screen, and it gives it this massive spiritual weight and significance.
That's the power of intention, isn't it? And it's the power of using modern tools to maximize the impact of that intention. They argue that the future of charity is about embracing these advancements to better serve the ummah, the global community. They're reframing digital assets not as a speculative gamble, but as a potential lifeline for those in need.
That is a complete reframing of the entire conversation around crypto. Usually you hear about Lambos and getting rich quick. Here, the conversation is about it being a lifeline. It's about survival.
Exactly. A tool for good.
Okay, I want to play devil's advocate one more time. I know we have some skeptics listening. The learners who are thinking, this all sounds great in theory, but I need to be 100% sure before I act. The source material has a great FAQ section, so I'm just going to fire some of these common questions at you, and I want you to give me the expert answer based on the data in the guide.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Question 1, the big one. Is it really halal? I know we've covered this, but summarize the core argument for the person who might have just tuned in.
Yes. The guide concludes it is halal because of two main principles: parity and the lack of gharar. It represents actual verifiable ownership of physical gold in a secure vault. It is not gambling on a future price. It is owning a current asset. It meets the criteria of being an asset-backed spot transaction.
Okay. Question 2. How is the value actually determined? Is it some guy in a basement just typing in numbers? Or some complex algorithm that could crash?
No, absolutely not. The value is tied directly, one-to-one, to the real-time market price of physical gold.
Yes.
Specifically the LBMA gold price. It simply acts as a digital title. If gold goes up 1% in the global market, your token goes up 1%. If gold goes down, your token goes down. It is merely a digital reflection of a physical reality.
Question 3. Can I really pay my zakat with it? Like, does it count religiously? Is it a valid payment?
Absolutely. The guide is clear on this. Since it is considered a zakatable asset, just like cash or physical gold, paying with it counts. You calculate your 2.5%, and you can transfer that amount directly to the charity's specified wallet addresses. The intention and the transfer of value are what matters.
All right, last one. Question 4. Why should I bother switching? Why not just stick to cash? It's worked for years.
3 reasons: accessibility, security, and lower overhead. You democratize access for people who can't afford a full ounce of gold. You eliminate the real-world physical risk of holding cash or gold at home. You reduce the fees and premiums associated with buying and selling physical metal. And from a practical standpoint for the charity, the speed of the transfer is superior, which means your donation gets to do good work faster.
Boom. There it is. The logic really does seem to hold up under scrutiny.
It's very well reasoned.
So, as we start to wrap up this discussion, I just want to zoom out for a second. We've gone on quite a journey here.
We have. It's been quite a trip, from the ancient world to the digital one.
We started with the ancient dinar, the physical gold coins of the early believers in the dusty markets of history. We moved through the logistical headaches of the modern world, the heavy metal, the safes, the anxiety. We unpacked the technology of XAUT and PAXG, the cryptography, the vaults, the digital titles, and we landed on the spiritual application, using these futuristic seeming tokens to fulfill an ancient sacred obligation like zakat.
It's a remarkable synthesis when you see it all laid out like that. It really shows that faith is not static. It adapts. It has the ability to absorb the best of the current era while discarding the things that cause harm. The vehicle of value has changed from a coin to a paper note to a digital token, but the obligation, zakat, remains the same. The standard, gold, remains the same.
And here's the thought I want to leave our listeners with, a provocative thought, if you will, to mull over.
Please.
We often complain that modern technology is a distraction from our faith. We think of our phones as these devices that pull us away from prayer. We think of the internet as a place filled with vice, and often that's true. But in this specific instance, just look at what's actually happening. Through transparency, through speed, through the accuracy of these calculators, technology might actually be allowing the believer to fulfill their obligations better than before.
That's a really profound point. It removes the friction. It removes the excuse. It makes the act of giving almost as instantaneous as the thought of giving.
Exactly. It turns the impulse to do good into the action of doing good instantly.
Yeah.
You don't have that cooling off period where you might second guess your own generosity.
And that is an incredibly powerful thing. When you lower the barrier to doing good in the world, you just get more good in the world.
So here's my call to action for you, the listener. Check your own holdings. Are you sitting on assets that you haven't yet purified? Are you looking for a way to invest that truly aligns with your values, but you've been a bit scared of the technology?
Look at the tools that are available. Go to the site and look at the CAT calculator. Look at the specific crypto wallet addresses they provide. Read the guide for yourself.
And remember the cause that was mentioned. The source specifically highlighted giving zakat to Palestine. Real aid for real people in desperate need.
Indeed.
If you want to dive deeper into the guide we've been discussing today, if you want to use that calculator or find those wallet addresses for your zakat, there is one place you need to go.
It's all right there.
Visit www.islamicdonate.com.